Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving headfirst into, well, one of the great paradoxes in modern business. It's the story of, a $6.9 billion fashion empire that was built on a complete refusal to chase what everyone else was chasing.
It really is the ultimate case study in strategic resistance. When you look at the source material we pulled for this deep dive, the central fact is just, it's so counterintuitive. Miuccia Prada, the voice of the brand, openly said she never wanted to be liked.
And yet she creates this business whose value just compounds year after year. I mean, think about the industry this is. It runs on instant attention, on viral moments, on big, loud, visible logos.
And Prada chose the opposite. Restraint, intellectual challenge,
Yeah.
sometimes designs that were, deliberately uncomfortable.
So our mission for you here is to really get under the hood of that. How did this demanding, almost selective approach become the foundation for so much power and, well, financial success?
Right. We're breaking down the principles of that resistance. This isn't just about clothes. It's about a very specific mindset. It's about creating value, not through hype, but through a unique and really durable form of cultural credibility.
So let's start with Miuccia herself. Where did this all come from?
You have to understand the starting point.
Yeah.
When she takes over the family business in 1978, the sources are clear. Prada was, well, it was unremarkable.
A luggage brand. Right, respected, but not a fashion powerhouse.
Exactly. It had no clear voice in that global fashion conversation. It wasn't dominant or, particularly desirable in the way we think of luxury houses today. But that lack of identity, that was her blank slate.
And this is where her personal background becomes so critical. Because it's just wildly unconventional for a leader of a luxury brand.
Absolutely. She wasn't trained as a designer. She had a PhD in political science. She studied philosophy, was involved in left-wing feminist movements in Milan.
So that's the lens she's looking through.
It's the key. When she looked at fashion, she wasn't seeing fabric. She saw systems of power. She saw signals.
Signals.
How clothes communicate class, intelligence, aspiration, even conformity.
That completely reframes the whole thing. She's not asking, is this pretty? She's asking, what is this saying?
Precisely. And here's the defining insight that shaped Prada's entire destiny. If you use a signal that everyone gets immediately, like a huge logo,
It loses its power.
it instantly loses its power to signify any real distinction. If luxury is too easy to read, it's easy to replace. For her, true luxury had to be about definition, about intellectual understanding, not just simple decoration.
Okay, but hang on. Doesn't that inherently limit your scale? How do you build a $6.9 billion business if you're deliberately confusing 95% of your potential customers?
That's the paradox we're digging into. She adopted what the sources call the strategy of discomfort. She'd introduce designs that were muted, sometimes with awkward proportions, in colors that weren't, instantly beautiful.
Why? What was the goal?
The goal was to force you to pause, to create a moment of, intellectual friction.
Yeah.
To make you ask, do I dislike this or do I just not get it yet?
That pause is everything.
It changes your relationship with the brand from just passive admiration to active interpretation.
So by refusing the big logos, she was filtering her audience.
Totally. If you needed that validation, if you needed the instant compliments, Prada just wasn't for you. It became a kind of cultural password.
A password, I like that.
Yeah. Only those in the know who valued that intellectual depth could read it. It created a smaller but deeply loyal audience that let the brand build credibility over decades.
And this is where the philosophy smacks right into commercial reality. It all gets distilled into one single radical product that basically proved her entire theory right. The nylon backpack.
A phenomenal example. Anti-luxury is psychological power.
Okay, so in 1985, she introduces this black nylon backpack. We have to remember nylon back then was for military gear, industrial equipment. It was at the absolute bottom of the luxury hierarchy.
It was essentially a cheap material in a world obsessed with exotic skins and heavy leather.
And she chose it on purpose.
Precisely because it made no sense to the market. By the mid-'80s, luxury was predictable. It was shiny, it was heavy. Miuccia asked this really dangerous question. What if luxury didn't need to look expensive at all?
And she priced it like a luxury item.
Yes, but gave customers None of the visual cues they expected for that price. No shine, no heavy leather. It was a huge risk.
Oh, it's a bold psychological move.
Absolutely. To own that backpack, you needed confidence. You had to trust that its minimal, almost utilitarian design was a statement of intellectual superiority, even if someone else might mistake it for, just a regular bag.
So she wasn't selling nylon. She was selling distance from mass taste.
That's it. The test was simple. Are you buying things to be recognized or because you recognize something in them?
And the success of that backpack, it must have rewired the whole company.
It did. It rewired their belief system. From that point on, they knew they could define luxury on their own terms. They proved that restraint, that friction, could be priced like exclusivity.
The ultimate payoff is so simple then. Once customers learned to trust Prada's mind, they stopped questioning its materials.
Which leads us straight into how they managed the economics of this, the longevity. Once they proved the concept, they had to decide how fast to grow it and how much control to give up for scale.
Right, because in the 90s and early 2000s, the whole luxury industry just explodes. It's an expansion race.
Everyone is opening stores, licensing their names, chasing global visibility. Growth was everything.
And Prada just refused to play.
They chose a deeply unfashionable path. Slow, intentional growth. Miuccia and her husband, Patrizio Bertelli, they prioritized creative authority over reach. Their core principle was, if you lose control of the meaning, scale just amplifies the damage.
So they were optimizing for decades of relevance, not quarterly excitement.
Exactly.
That takes incredible discipline, especially when your competitors are posting these huge growth numbers. How did they manage that on the business side?
Well, look at their IPO in 2011. Even that was measured. They chose the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, sure, for access to Asian markets. But the real strategy behind the capital raise was to fund long-term stability and cut debt.
Not to fund a frenzy?
No. The family kept absolute control over the vision. It was funding coherence.
But they made mistakes too, right? They weren't immune.
Oh, far from it. And this is a crucial point. In the early 2000s, they got caught up a bit. They acquired other brands like Fendi and Helmut Lang.
And those expansions failed. Strained the finances.
Massively. But where most leaders would double down out of pride, they did the opposite.
They retreated.
They treated retreat as discipline, not weakness. They sold off the assets, simplified the operations, and brought the focus right back to the intellectual core of Prada.
So while the industry might see that as a failure, she saw it as regaining clarity.
Clarity was survival. She protected the creative narrative above all else.
And that retreat, paradoxically, actually strengthened their moat. By staying selective and difficult, they made themselves harder to replace.
That difficulty became their durable advantage. It meant they could slow down without collapsing.
So, with the business side secured, they could get even more radical with the design philosophy, treating fashion less like entertainment and more like social commentary.
They really did. They stopped trying to please. Usually when a brand gets successful, the designs get simpler, safer, to maximize sales.
Prada did the opposite.
Completely. Collections started exploring intellectual anxiety, gender ambiguity, political tension. The clothes were meant to say something, and often that something was unsettling.
It was like holding a mirror up to society, not offering an escape from it.
Yes. If the world felt anxious, Miuccia believed fashion should reflect that honestly.
And this led to criticism, right? People calling the collections ugly or cold.
Oh, all the time. But she was operating under this powerful rule of cultural leadership. If people understand you too quickly, you're not leading, you're following.
That's a challenging idea for any business. It means you're intentionally putting out a product that might not be immediately liked.
Exactly. It didn't build mass devotion. It built deep, profound loyalty among a very specific, very coveted audience, the thinkers, the creatives, the cultural insiders.
And that loyalty became this incredible asset when trends shifted.
That focus on the thinkers, not the crowd, is the whole key to their quiet power.
Right. They weren't trying to dress the loudest celebrity.
No. Prada became the uniform for people who shape culture without needing high visibility. Architects, museum directors, influential editors, filmmakers.
So while competitors were optimizing for mass aspiration, for saying I'm rich,
Prada was optimizing for intellectual alignment. It signaled, I'm thinking, I'm culturally aware.
if you know, you know.
That's the entire game. And this created quiet power. It's why Prada was practicing this philosophy for nearly 40 years before quiet luxury became a viral trend in the 2020s.
They owned the philosophy while others were just borrowing the look.
And identity builds loyalty in a way that trends never can. Their customer base didn't explode, but it deepened. It allowed them to stay relevant without constantly reinventing themselves.
Which brings us to the final point, really. How this discipline helped them navigate crisis over and over again.
We talked about the financial strain in the early 2000s. That deliberate retreat was a survival strategy built on intellectual coherence.
Protecting the core idea, not just the momentum.
And you see it again brilliantly around 2020. During all that global instability, what does Miuccia do? She brings in Raf Simons as co-creative director.
Not a replacement, a partner, an intellectual counterpart.
Exactly. It was a signal that Prada was interested in dialogue, in continuity and depth. It wasn't a panic move to chase a trend. It was a move to strengthen the creative core.
And it worked. By the time the industry caught up and started talking about quiet luxury, Prada didn't have to explain a thing.
They were already there. The foundation was so strong it could absorb those shocks without losing its shape.
And that coherence, that's the $6.9 billion story.
It is. The core lesson is that the money came from a series of uncomfortable decisions, repeated for decades, to value clarity of message over mass popularity. Prada proved that restraint can scale, and that being underestimated is a huge advantage if you're playing the long game.
In Miuccia Prada's world, the ultimate luxury isn't visibility. It is, without a doubt, longevity.
And it leaves you with a really challenging thought for your own work. Whether it's your career, a business you're building, whatever it is, Prada's path forces you to ask a demanding question. Are you trying to optimize your efforts to be noticed quickly? Or are you aiming to build something durable enough to be remembered for a long time? That choice is the power that compounds quietly.